Okay, I'm just waiting for notification of this to appear on the screen. Okay, the meeting is now recording, so I will take the suggestion for Cambuslang and Rutherglen Area Committee on Tuesday the 10th of August 2021. So I can see that we have John Bradley present. Do we have Walter Brogan? No. I can see that we have Robert Brown. Do we have Janine Kalikis? No. I can see that we have Margaret Cowie, Alistair Fulton, Anne LeBlond, Martin Lennon, Katie Loudon, Carol Nugent, Margaret Walker. Do we have Jared Wark? No. And officers present today are Ian Beattie, Michelle Lynn, Ian Guild, Martin Muir, Colin McFarlane, Jacqueline Wallace, Jacqueline Queen, Karen McLeod, and myself, Carol Lyon. I'll hand back to yourself now, Chair.
Great, thanks, Carol. Okay, we'll get started. Do we have any declaration of interest? Margaret?
Carol, can I declare an interest in agenda item 8? And it's the community grants, the Royal Borough of Rutherglen History Group.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Margaret. Okay, we'll move to the minutes of the previous meeting. Do we have any questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, I'll move them as a correct record then.
Second.
Thanks, John. Okay, we'll move to item 3 on the agenda, which is a review of daycare services, and we're joined by Ian and Michelle.
Thanks, Chair. So we provided the committee with a sort of brief report giving an overview of daycare services and the current state of play. Michelle is on the call to give a bit of detail, so I'm going to just introduce the report and we hand over to Michelle to kind of talk through in some of the detail where we're at. But essentially, we had to shut down the day services because of the COVID pandemic. We've been running a kind of interim outreach service in the meantime to try and provide some support to service users and carers. That's broadly been successful, albeit with a few ups and downs along the way, but I think we've seen quite a lot of benefit arising from that. I want to kind of develop that thinking a little bit more in the plans going forward. We've begun the process of reopening some of the day services in line with the kind of easing of lockdown, taking account of the ongoing kind of guidance that's available to us. One of the issues we've had to obviously take account of has just been the practicalities around social distancing, number of households allowed to kind of gather together, taking account of the fact we've got a particularly kind of vulnerable group and a group that needs quite a lot of support at times to maintain those kind of restrictions we've all had to deal with in day to day. So that's been kind of quite challenging for the staff teams. I think also quite challenging for the community to process and understand just in terms of how that all works. But Michelle can kind of give you as much detail about that as you would like, but just give a flavour of some of the challenges there. So I think the reopening has been taking it kind of steadily. That's going quite well, and services are continuing to step up. Alongside the COVID situation, we've also obviously undertaken a review of day services on the back of the fact that there was kind of a reduction in usage. There was quite a lot of kind of gaps in occupancy of day services. So Michelle's led a very kind of thorough piece of work having a look at that. And that's already been through the IGB and social work committee to consider. We've put forward some, I suppose, proposals for how we might take the service forward in the future, which predominantly was looking at probably a reduction in the number of buildings we use, but maybe bringing together adult and older people services into some key buildings and localities to maintain some element of the kind of outreach model we've put in play, really to maximise the best use of the resources, but also importantly to try and respond positively to self-directed support to people who want to take the cash rather than take a counsel universal service. So we're trying to kind of maximise the range and the depth of services that people can have access to. So our proposal is really to maintain some element of building-based services, but use kind of key buildings more as a kind of hub of activity. So some time in the building, some time out in the community using outreach, and we're kind of currently about to do a bit more kind of consultation on that work. That's been delayed a little bit because of some IT glitches, I believe, but I think we're on the cusp of taking that forward. So I'm hoping that the paper gives a kind of broad overview of that situation, and folks understand the complications around trying to run a service for vulnerable service users in the midst of the pandemic, and I suppose the efforts being made to try and sustain some kind of input in the short term. I think in the paper, Michelle's kind of talked a little bit about the services within the local area, the Harry Heaney Centre and Lifestyles in Eastfield in particular. We've also touched on the Eva Burroughs Centre, which is now no longer operating. That was a kind of contracted service. The contract had expired some time ago. We had quite a lot of discussion with the Salvation Army over the previous kind of 12 months or so in terms of refreshing that arrangement, looking at how we might bring them onto the supported living contract framework. But I think the kind of the COVID period and some changes in their staffing became a bit of an impediment for them in terms of continuing the service. So that service is now stood down. We've left the kind of door open for them to come back to us for further discussions about developing a different type of service going forward into the future that responds to local needs. So I'll kind of leave it to that and maybe pick up any particular questions. But I say Michelle's here and is close to the detail of the individual centres and service users and how the service is currently operating, so she can pick up any particular questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ian, and thanks, Chair. I didn't actually miss very much there, Ian, to be honest. That's quite a thorough introduction. I think probably just a bit more of the detail that Ian's talking about some of the challenges that we've had. And we all recognise that the 9th of August and beyond level 0 has made changes to the vast majority of businesses and services. But our instructions from the Scottish Government are very clear, and that we actually have to sit tight right now and actually make no changes in our health and social care settings where we deliver direct care services. There's a considerable amount more for us to consider than most business types. So we can go into supermarkets, we can go to bars, restaurants, we can go 50,000 at a football match these days, but we actually are still in a stage where we have to apply social distancing within the direct service provision buildings. We are significantly bound by infection prevention and control regulations, public health guidance, everything from ventilation to chlorine decontamination, cleaning methods in these settings. So we have been promised further guidance soon that's specific to health and social care settings, but understandably this has caused a huge, kind of concern and a lot of challenges from us, from the public, people who use services and their carers, who do not want to believe that we're telling the truth when it comes to we are a different style of business. So that's been very challenging, certainly for myself over the last 10 days or so since the 9th of August became a more definitive date. Have had countless inquiries from people. So I've met a lot with carers and advocacy organisations and whatnot over the last week or so, just to try and reassure people that we are doing everything we can to keep moving forward in our recovery. I think probably what some people are concerned about is that this COVID has come on the back of us actually starting off a day service review. Now, it started off well before COVID, and we're working really hard to have people not conflate the two. So we're not doing a day service review because of COVID. The day service review was imperative anyway, and it started back in June 2019. So we're having to try to have people think, quite differently about these two things. And whilst one impacts on the other, and we've learned a lot from COVID, and as Ian said, the development of an outreach service that we intend to take forward to be part of a service redesign. not to conflate the two and think that one is because of the other. Okay, so that's quite challenging for us. So we have managed now. Initially, when we did this paper, we were just at the beginning of reopening some of our buildings. So Harry Smith in Lanark, Murray Owen in East Kilbride, Newbury in Hamilton, and Meldrum in East Kilbride are all currently now open, and that's gone according to plan. Harry Heaney in Rutherglen and Lifestyles in Rutherglen are both now operational, which is great. Harry Heaney's been operational since the mid-May, and Lifestyles Eastfield since mid-July. So they're all open but at reduced capacity, so there's less numbers of people in the Rutherglen area receiving a service within the building base. But we have maintained, as Ian said, the outreach service. So people are still receiving a service within their community settings. And for some of these people, it's actually within their own homes. And that's the kind of strands we want to take forward with the review is, a service within your hub, should you need that, or within your community, or indeed within your home, if actually that best meets your individual outcomes. So it's given us a chance to kind of try this out really before, proper redesign of the service comes along. So we're getting some good information from the work that we're doing just now. Just Lesmahago, we have that earmarked for opening as well. We've postponed that until the 23rd of August. It was actually due to open a bit earlier. Postponed it to the 23rd of August. We've got some difficulties covering domestic hours, and this is because we have got very high levels of infection prevention and control standards to meet. All of these buildings, to let you understand, have got part-time domestic staff, but whilst we're open, we need whole-time domestic staff there. So we're having to pull staff from the various buildings to make whole-time equivalents, so that we can keep a lesser number of buildings open and still actually meet the standards that have been set for us, which are fairly rigorous. Stonehouse and Fairhill, they remain popular sites for vaccination work at this point. So that's Stonehouse, in Stonehouse, the Lark Hall area, and Fairhill and Hamilton. Now that we have started vaccinating younger people, these sites are being picked again as good central points for vaccination. So we're having to kind of just keep an eye on when we're going to be able to re-establish the services there. But again, people in these areas do have the outreach service and have had options to attend in other areas if they require an in-building service. So we're not certain as yet when we're now going to be able to open these, but we are monitoring it. So just a bit more specifically about the Rutherglen area, got as much up-to-date information as I could so that coming to the meeting, we had there's 58 people in Rutherglen who actually will receive a direct service this week from the day services, and that's whether within the building or without the building, or indeed maybe a mixture of both. So there's about 450 hours of care being delivered this week across the Rutherglen area. Now, just to put that in perspective, we have around 650 hours of care allocated to that area. But we have some challenges in that we have almost 200 hours of care staff vacancies in Rutherglen at the moment. So as soon as we have those posts filled, we will be able to have another couple of hundred hours of care there. Now, the managers in those areas in Rutherglen, they were advertising. No, they've not advertised. They have interviewed last week and are interviewing right up till the end of this week. So hopefully in the next few weeks going forward, we'll have staff in those positions. We're also still lending an additional just around 100 hours of support into our care home services, and that includes in the Rutherglen area, because as we know, they have had huge challenges as well through the COVID period. In terms of the review, as Ian said, Eva Burrows has decided that they are not going to continue with us for the time being. We did quite a bit of work with them over the COVID period about a year ago, in the hope that they might opt for more of a self-directed support and using an outreach model. They had very small numbers of people who were actually attending in the building. And obviously, as Ian said, there was changes in personnel and stuff. So that they've decided at this point not to go forward, but we actually feel that we have enough capacity, even within our own services in Rutherglen, to be able to pick up anything that would have come their way. So we don't have a huge waiting list or anything down in Rutherglen. We don't tend to have people waiting for services. We tend to be able to respond when they need that. So moving forward in the review, I think you've all had an opportunity to hear quite a bit about the detail of the review, but really consultation in the future, which, as Ian said, is about to come online. It should have been online last week, but there was a bit of a technical hitch. So, but our further consultation very much focuses on, compliance with SDS legislations and the IJB strategic intentions, looking at maintaining access to building-based services, but likely not all of them that we have just now. I think with £11.5 million invested in these services annually, and for example, 2.4 million of that being utilised on fleet transport, we figure that we can actually redirect and redirect some of the funding and redesign the service to actually have much more care and support for people, rather than spending the amount that we currently do on infrastructure and on fleet transport, which quite poorly contributes to all of our climate ambitions that we would have. So less of fleet and more of other ways of doing things. So the consultation includes SDS, it includes transport, very much development of an individualised outreach model, and asking actually the public in this consultation that's coming out if they believe that the three kind of models, the three strands that we have in mind, would actually meet the needs of the population of adults and older people. And obviously there is an anxiety that we might do, as some neighbouring local authorities have done, which is to strip the day service building model completely out of the service, and we've made a commitment to not doing that, and not because it's not a choice thing. Actually, the evidence from the review told us that would not be the right thing to do. So we need to listen to that evidence. So we will, obviously, as Ian said, maintain a commitment to that. So the consultation, let's hope, fingers crossed, technology and all that good stuff, that is ready to go this week. It will go live, and it will be at the same time, it will be backed by a summary of the review report. Now, the review report is quite extensive, including appendices, well over 100 pages. So rather than ask people to absorb all of that information, there is a summary being published. So that's just coming literally off the press. I think it's tomorrow. So that will go out at the same time as people then have access to the consultation. So that's quite good. It'll just remind them what the review and the evidence told us. It says we promise you consultation, and the consultation will actually be there. And then we'll have paper copies of the consultation as well. So we recognise that a lot of the client and carer group don't access IT or don't access it very well. So there will be paper copies and advocacy support for people to actually come back to us and tell us what they're looking for. And we're also planning, before moving forward as well, to have some carer face-to-face focus groups. So probably online, but remote focus groups to actually talk to groups in each of the 4 localities, because we recognise that there are differences in the needs of the localities in terms of the population, the geography, the health needs. So we will be talking to people in focus groups as well before we actually move forward with the next stage, which will hopefully be the redesign stage. So maybe the next time we come back, that'll be to talk to you about this is what the model's now looking like. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks both. Okay, we'll open up to questions now. Robert?
Yes, I understand the general outcome of this, but I wonder if in practical terms, if you look at the Harry, Heaney and Eastfield in our own area, what this means in practice once we're free of COVID. You've restarted them, you've got a reduced number of people there, you're doing more outreach. what will you be doing with the particular people concerned? And the sort of other aspect of that is that there's clearly an element of care in this, in that relatives and carers have got, if you like, a safe place and a safe arrangement for people at certain times of the week. And that obviously is quite a significant contribution as well. Is that element being taken account of in the continued discussion about all of this?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for that, Councillor. We actually, one of the things that we have consulted on, and I didn't mention this, I should have done, was the times of the availability of the service. And actually that is very much focused on suiting carers and parents who have work commitments or other family commitments, or indeed just an interest in their own well-being and actually need to look after themselves as well. So that is a consideration going forward. And one of the other things that we found in the evidence in the review was that people come to these large buildings but don't tend to spend a huge amount of time in them. What they do is they come in by bus, and they're no sooner in than they leave again by bus to go to the local sports centre, the local bowling facility, so these are the kind of activities that people are very much engaged in. So rather than having people busing in and out all day, which takes up an inordinate amount of time and actually doesn't give people a particularly good day at times, is actually to start the day where you're going to start and to finish the day where you're going to finish, rather than necessarily having to always come back to base. And that way we feel that we'll be able to provide some of the other services in these buildings that people are crying out for. So, for example, our physiotherapy learning disability service. So instead of people having to go for their appointments to, Kirtland's Hospital or whatever, we can actually hold our physio clinics where our people are and within the heart of people's own communities. So that's just an example. So I think we're trying to cover all bases.
Yeah, if I could just add a couple of bits in, I think we're trying to embrace the concept of self-directed support and move away from a focus being on a building to be more focused on outcomes and more kind of personalised services. So it's really about building on the initial assessment of the supported person and the carer, identifying the outcomes that they wish to have met, and trying to have a range of flexible options available to them. So for some people, that will be a direct payment. For some people, that will be some time in the building. For others, it will be some of the outreach type approaches that Michelle's described. I think for the foreseeable future, I think we're probably thinking that in the Rutherglen Cambuslang area, the Eastfield and the Harry Heaney buildings will be the hubs. I suppose it's maybe just the scale of how many people would be in the building on a particular day versus how many people will be supported by the staff team out in the community is the bits that we need to work through. And as Michelle was indicating, if we can have a look at some of the quite costly transport arrangements, if we can convert some of those buses into care staff, that would give us a bit more kind of capacity going forward. But that does involve a bit of discussion, negotiation with service users about different forms of transportation. And I think there's no kind of one size fits all in here. I think we need to have just a bit more of a flexible approach to how we embrace the arrangements all around. So we are trying to look at an improvement to the service and to make most efficient use of the resource the council has available to it.
Okay, Margaret.
Thanks, Chair. It's just thank you for the presentation and the update. It would actually be quite useful as well at some point to get some more detailed information around what people are being offered through self-directed support. You obviously know as well as I do, there's different budget levels within SDS, going from sort of very basic to quite complex, and obviously to see how that actually compares in terms of what the impact on their carers is, because one of the key considerations here is going to be the impact on carers. And I'm sure, Lynn, you mentioned early on that you were getting a lot of representation from carers just now, and I'm not surprised because of various reasons. So that would be interesting to actually get some more information on that. And also it is worrying that we're 200 hours short just now. So, clearly some people out there, if they aren't actually getting access to buildings or, other services, then that must be having an impact. So that's a worrying factor to kind of be moving on to, providing this all singing, all dancing outreach when at the moment we're actually 200 hours short. So that's a concern. And the only other thing I was going to ask was, I think focus groups are good and consultation is good. And it's really good to see that the feedback was acknowledged from the original consultation, because the original intention was to do away with all these day centres. So I'm glad at least it's been acknowledged through the feedback that that's not really what people want. But anyway, I was going to ask, is there going to be any plans to actually consult face-to-face with people, given that we are now moving out of these restrictions? Because online is limited and face-to-face is so much better in terms of getting views and opinions from people. So it was just to ask, is there any plans for that anywhere down the line? Because obviously this is an ongoing process. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose a few questions in there, kind of, Councillor. I think we can certainly have a look at face-to-face consultation, because we obviously had planned the current arrangements, prior to the current easing of the restrictions, so we can go back and revisit those and see if we can fit some of that in. I think when we embarked upon the review, I don't think either Michelle or I really saw losing buildings in their entirety as being an option. I think we'd kind of observed some of that take place in other authorities and didn't see as being entirely productive. So I think we've always been more minded towards a more kind of blended approach. The concept of hub and spoke, which is a theme that we've got, I suppose, got in the HSCP about you're trying to kind of reach out as well as people just coming into buildings. So we've always been keen to promote that. In terms of self-directed support, we've got a kind of resource allocation system that's linked to individual assessments, both for the supported person and the carer, and we think that works fairly well. It's been subject to inspection, and they got a positive report, as it were, from the inspection in terms of allocating resource according to level of needs. So the more kind of complex the person's needs, the greater the budget should be to meet that circumstance. I think what we're really trying to do is to maximise the options for folks to kind of think through how to use that budget's available to their household to best effect. How does it benefit them to the greatest? Because everyone's circumstances are different, and want to be able to kind of tailor that. And that was, I suppose, one of the things that came out of the review, was that people were a bit kind of shoehorned into what was available. So we're very kind of sort of governed by when the transport's available, because some of the buses are used also for some of the school transport arrangements, so we only get the bus at a certain time, and the buildings open at a certain time. We've got staff in particular types of contracts, so there's inherent restrictions in the existing service. So what we're trying to do is open it up a little bit more. It might be step by step, and it isn't something's going to happen overnight. We're probably talking about a programme over 2 or 3 years to kind of get to the end point once we've agreed the final model. But we really are trying to kind of open up some opportunities here, and it might be helpful to come back to this type of committee with a bit more of a local update on some of the SDS arrangements. So maybe that's something we could think about for a future meeting. We could prepare a short presentation as we've done here, just in terms of what the local picture is around SDS, so folks have got a flavour of that. So we could certainly have a look at that.
Thanks, Ian. I think
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Chair, could I just reassure Councillor Walker that the people with critical and substantial needs, despite us obviously having vacancies now, we would always carry vacancies at some level, but to just ensure that people with critical and substantial needs are actually priority in the service delivery at the moment. So there should be nobody falling through the cracks. I feel quite confident about that.
Okay, thank you, Lynn.
Okay, Walter, was your hand up? I'm sorry, I can't see all hands.
Yes, my hand was up.
Thanks, Walter.
Thanks, Chair. I guess it'd be remiss of me not just to ask a few questions here, given that Eva Burrows is on your radar for perhaps not reopening. I think, first of all, I need to understand, and I don't know about Alistair or the others, really what has happened and what is going to happen there. Because the ward itself, that's the only place we have for old folk to go and daycare. And the questions are going to be asked. You mentioned is it COVID that's closing this? Questions are going to be asked about why we're closing that or not reintroducing that service. So I certainly need more information so that I can answer the questions that are undoubtedly going to come my way as to why it's closing, why it's not. Fully understand we need to readjust the issues with buses turning up and then people getting on buses. But my knowledge of that centre is that most of the things that happened there were in the centre and not outside the centre. So I need to understand what, where the information's coming from and where we're going. I'd also like to understand who we're talking to in Eva Burrows as well, if you give me a contact there. I've got other contacts for other joint ventures that we have with them, but I'd like to have a face-to-face with them to find out where they're coming from, because they play a big part in the community, and it's not just as part of the care facility that they operate. So I'm kind of worried that if that goes, then the whole centre might just go, and that really is concerning. So I appreciate you if you bear with me, and maybe if you could help me out there.
Yeah, I can give a bit of an overview around that. So Eva Burrows was a contracted day centre service, so the contract was quite aged, and actually elapsed some years ago. So we really had to reconsider that arrangement. Given the contract value, if we were going to recontract that, probably would have had to be an open tender. So Eva Burrows might not even have won the contract had we gone out to re-procure it. I guess in terms of the findings of the review, Eva Burrows I think had reduced their offer over the period of the contract due to service user requirements. I guess to that people putting the demand for the service, and the numbers had reduced as was seen in our own services, and I suppose the bottom line is we didn't really have a need for that many day centre building based services in the Rutherglen Cambuslang locality. So we re-engaged the Salvation Army around what a specification might look like going forward, and we were very much talking to them in terms of self-directed support about people opting into a service, but given the level of occupancy of the places, there might be a slightly reduced service. So what we were trying to look at was how we might work with them in terms of some kind of self-directed support kind of concept where people will use their budget to basically buy into that placement. So that's the whole point of SDS. You've got the money and you take your money to the care shop, as it were, to buy the service. So we were certainly talking to them about those options, and we were in discussions with some of the national leadership team. So as well as the local manager, we met with the regional manager and a couple of folks who are based down in London, I think. So we met with some of the more senior managers over the piece. Now, I think over the peak of COVID, I think they were down to having contact with about two or three individuals. I think a number of their staff moved on, including their kind of manager. We talked to them about accessing some of the sustainability payments that the Scottish Government had made available, but their legal and financial team felt they weren't in the position to accept that offer. So we weren't able to kind of offer them the financial support that might have been available. So in essence, we terminated the existing lapsed contract and left it with the Salvation Army to come back to us with some proposals. around the kind of that SDS kind of concept of where we thought there may be local need and where they may have a role to play. And I think one of the things I put to them, given their location, potentially around outreach, they were quite well placed to be looking beyond the Cambuslang area in terms of reaching out into other parts of South Lanarkshire in terms of using that as a kind of hub and spoke kind of concept. But and I think they were understood where we're coming from, because I think they've had discussions with other commissioners across the UK along similar lines. But to date, they haven't kind of come back to us with anything fresh. So if they're interested in kind of working with us in terms of different service models and increasing the range and depth of services, we're very much open to discussion. But as things stand, that contract has come to an end. So as we reopen services, there'll be no multi-pupils daycare operating from Eva Boroughs. I think that they have taking on some additional work from other parts of the council in the meantime, maybe to sustain them. But I understand your concern, Councillor, about the impact this may have on that particular building, as it were, in a sense, long-term sustainability. If they've lost this kind of contract, if there's not a need for this kind of contract, what that means for them going forward. But we have to, I suppose, think in terms of in terms of our commissioning requirements and how best to allocate the resources. And I think currently Eva Boroughs isn't in the picture, but I say we're open to further discussion with the organisation around older people support models, that if they have an appetite to take that forward.
Okay, I appreciate the update. I guess it's the impact in the area where they don't have much to have something taken away is basically the Big Bad Council closing down yet another facility, and why us again? But that's a wider issue.
But the way I would put it is the individual service user, individual carer, has still got a budget available to them so they can access services. So as I say, the whole principle of self-directed support, and actually if you look at some of the advice from Audit Scotland, for example, they're very clear in saying that councils should be moving away from a focus on being service orientated and building orientated to be much more focused on personalised budgeting and personal outcomes, and looking at more innovative ways of doing that. So in a way, we have to give up some of what services we've traditionally used to free up that resource, that capacity to do more innovative things going forward, to give that kind of choice and control back to the service user and the carer.
Katie?
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Ian, for clarifying some of that. I mean, it's obviously, I share some of Walter's concerns as a ward councillor as well. So it's good to know a bit more detail, and obviously, I'm sure all of us would appreciate any update if there is any further conversation with the Salvation Army going forward. Because obviously, as you say, this was a contracted service. So Walter, I do have to say I've got a slight problem with this sort of characterisation of the Big Bad Council removing a service. I know you were talking in perhaps the hypothetical or the third person there, but I think as local representatives we've got a responsibility to be accurate with the information that we share with the wider community, and that's not a characterisation that I think is fair given the information we've been given. Thanks, Gary.
Chair, if I may, I had no intention of sharing what I said in this meeting with anybody else. It was for the meeting only.
Walter, just as a reminder, the meeting is being live streamed to YouTube today, so just for your information, okay? I don't see any further hands. Do we have any other questions, comments? Okay, happy to agree the reports.
Agree.
Thank you. Thank you for coming along today, Ian and Michelle. It's really appreciated. Thank you for the update. I think we can all understand the challenges the resources faced during COVID. So thanks for taking the time to come along, and please pass our thanks on to staff too.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. You're welcome to leave the meeting if you want, because I know that you're very busy, so feel free if you need to move on.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to item 4 on the agenda, and that's participatory budgeting, footpaths and roadways, and we're joined by Ian Guild and Martin Muir.
Thank you, Chair. I'll cover the report. I've got a bit of a squeaky voice, so bear with me. I'll cover the report on behalf of both myself and Martin. But obviously, anything I miss on Martin's behalf from the roadside, I'll pass it over to him at the end in case I've got anything wrong, which he says I usually do get wrong. So, report on participatory budget and the additional £2 million that was made available for the footpaths and roads. I suppose the purpose and the recommendations are really to advise and note the process, the ultimate split of the £2 million across footways and road projects, the next steps where we'll do the work, any further communication. But I think one of the more important parts will be, given this was our first attempt at a mainstream PB exercise, what we're learning, how we're going to take it forward, because ultimately there's going to be more. The £2 million itself was allocated across the 4 localities, and what we actually used was roads network length to identify a split across each of the 4 areas. That was what we felt was the sort of clearest way to allocate. You could have done it in population, you could have done it in the number of people that voted, but this was the road we went down. And pretty early on, we considered that there was going to be various options to vote, but rather than just have a sort of winner-takes-all scenario, we would allocate 75% across footpaths, and we would actually have a first and second place there, and we would have 25% towards carriageways. Similarly, we would have 2 options. The actual funding itself in table 3.4 shows that the footway in Rutherglen and Cambuslang amounted to 17%-ish, which allowed an allocation of £257,000 across footways. That was a share of £1.5 million. And the carriage network was 9.5%, which gave just shy of 50 grand for the road network, giving a sort of an overall total of £305,000 allocated to the Cambuslang and Rutherglen area. I had mentioned the options to vote. 3.5 showed the themes that we gave the public the opportunity to vote on, half a dozen of each, and obviously that's what threw together our decision-making process on which area would be successful. The process itself, it ran over 2 weeks, April into May, and we promoted it through a range of social media type options. We gave, as I say, the public 5 opportunities to vote under each of the 2 headings against the themes. And as I say, rather than having a single winner, we split the allocation across 2 options. Table 4.4 shows the actual allocation of the roads fund, and that was obviously 25% of the total. And you'll see in there, strangely, in Rutherglen and Cambuslang, first place was to resurface roads and car parks in country parks, which that was what was voted for, but I can see some faces there. So obviously we don't have any to what I would call country parks in the area, but I'll cover that when I go into Appendix 2. And obviously in second place, there was resurfacing main roads, which was Martin's side of the business. The bigger share of the vote, obviously, or the bigger share of the fund, sat against the footways and footpaths. And you'll notice in table 4.5 that Rutherglen and Cambuslang slightly bucked the trend in first place, with all other areas looking at footpaths and residential areas. However, Rutherglen and Cambuslang focused more on resurfacing footpaths and parks sports cultural areas. Second place falls back into Martin's remit, and that was to resurface footpaths in the residential areas. The rest of section 4 really covers the number of respondents and where we felt, particularly in 4.7, there was a bit of strength in people participating. But obviously Appendix 1, if you take the time to look through, gives you an overall breakdown of who voted and effectively age, colour, sex, creed, all the various splits of that. Getting down to the nitty gritty, section 5 starts to talk about what we're going to do next and what the actual funding looked like. You'll see in the table that the allocation to footpaths and footways in our parks, sports and recreational areas was £193,000. Second place for Martin on the footpaths was 64. Then you've got 36 for these imaginary country parks, and £12,000 for Martin under the resurfacing main roads. Well, Martin was able to identify the areas through his service priorities. Wasn't quite so straightforward for grounds. Myself and one of my estimators, we actually walked all the parks and we actually identified where we thought it was most appropriate to allocate the funding. The thing to remember is we only asked the public to vote on the themes. We didn't ask them to vote on the individual areas that the money would be spent. So there was still an element of management's discretion where we would allocate this. Appendix 2, if I could just refer you across towards the end of the report, and predominantly it's the last page, starts to highlight the parks and the breakdown of the £190,000, and you'll see yourself some of the parts were only a couple of £1,000, but then Cambuslang Park took the lion's share at £100,000. One slight anomaly was the Mill Road recreation area, which in its true sense to me wouldn't have been recognised as a park. However, and I don't know if Chair, you have seen the actual comments that came back through the PB exercise, there appeared to be a local push, if you like.
There, I think.
Yeah. So if you look at the comments, you'll see there was a lot of people commented on that access route between Mill Road and the recreational area beside the bowling. It's been a bone of contention for a while for a lot of people, and I think obviously having looked at the comments, we felt it appropriate to slot that in along with the rest of the parks. You'll see Martin's been allocated £64,000 and he's highlighted Blairbeth Road to benefit from that. Then we'll go back to the country parks. There was really two options here. We could have reallocated the money out of Rutherglen and Cambuslang, which I don't think would have pleased you guys. But not having country parks, we looked at the recreational side of it, and we identified Fern Hill Community, Cambuslang Institute and Eastfield Lifestyle as having needed repairs entering into the property. So we felt that was appropriate rather than fire the money up to Calder Glen or Chartler. And obviously the last area on the main roads is Caledonia Avenue in Rutherglen. One thing that's been made clear by Martin through roads is that roads are not convinced that will be sufficient to see the project through the two allocations that it's went Martin's way. And roads, I believe, are going to fund any excess that's needed within that project. I'm assuming within reason, Martin. Obviously, as I say, I visited all the parks, so I'm quite clear £2 million, great amount of money. I'm not going to fix all the ills of our path network, quite clearly. So what I've advocated here is not necessarily in all extremes full lengths of path. There are some of it's junctions, smaller areas, and some of it's longer areas, but it was always looked at as being the worst areas within each of the the locations that had been chosen. Obviously, 5.5 is quite important that I've already started the tendering process for these, because we're trying to meet the commitment that we will spend the money in 21-22. And obviously, the extent of 190 grand worth of pathworks is beyond our capabilities at the moment. So there's a tender process out there. One thing I would say, I have estimated all the costs based on a unit rate, which I think is reasonable. Based on scale, we may get a slightly cheaper return. And if that's the case, then we will look to add to that list, whether it be another couple of locations or whether it be increasing the actual volume in each of the parks that we've looked at. As far as communication goes, there's a need to advise all participants of what we asked them and how we got to where we are. Some gave email addresses, but we're going to work with the community engagement team for anybody that didn't give an email address, and how we contact them. So, social media, the South Lanarkshire View. Once again, there'll be a learning process there, because we'll find that people may come back and question, we voted, you didn't tell us. So we'll learn through that. And obviously that's where Section 7 comes in, and that is looking at the lessons learned. Immediately we're looking at 6 weeks is probably going to be better than 2 to get a better result. We're looking at issues around about devices in homes and whether there was enough of them to allow people to vote, considering whether we go forward and using paper voting. I don't think that's a way to go, and I think the report makes that clear, because there'll be additional cost and complication. However, I've done surveys in the past where we've used supermarkets and set up standpoints. So these are the sort of things that we would look at going forward to try and engage with more of the public. Obviously, we've got to also consider sign language and braille and everything under our equalities policy. I'll be getting as many people involved as we can. An element for you guys as elected members to get involved. You will have a whole range of contacts. So including yous early on in any future process allows you guys to get the message out there. Obviously, there was a couple of areas that stood out where there was an underrepresentation, and that goes back to Appendix 1. And that was, the three of them are noted there. It was a poor response from the areas of multiple deprivation. The under-24s seemed to be missed, whether they were interested, whether they knew about it. I suppose that's something we need to explore a wee bit further. And obviously ethnic minorities were slightly underrepresented in the final scores. As far as employee implications in finance, none at the moment. However, depending on how we take this forward in the future, there may be additional cost implications about how we roll this out. But it would be good to keep it as clean as it has been this time, because any effect on the overall budget for carrying out the actual process itself takes away from what happens on the ground. Anything I've missed, Martin?
No, Dean, you've covered it well. From my point of view, it's just a couple of things to note. Ian had mentioned before that the roads have a prioritised list. We have lists for roads, lists for footways. We use standard scoring, and we've got a list of schemes that we just simply worked our way down to find Blair Beth Road and Caledonian Avenue. Like Ian, we'll probably need to use subcontractors for some of the work. We've got a full sort of programme in-house for our own contractor, so we'll probably need to use subcontractors. Every effort will be made, and we do expect to deliver all the projects this financial year. And also, in terms of funding, it's likely that Caledonian Avenue will cost more than is shown in the table there, but we'll commit to funding the remainder of that.
That's me, Chair. If there's any questions, happy to. I expected more questions than I saw the presentation, so.
I think there might still be.
Keep it short and sweet as I could.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, Robert.
Yes, thanks very much. I thought it was actually a very good presentation. I think given the difficulty of matching, if you like, the professional recommendations of the departments against the PB process, I think quite a good job was done on this one. Like others, I think I had a slight concern about the odd results of the Rutherglen Cambuslang jury, so to speak, because the country park thing, I think, indicates perhaps there was maybe an element of special pleading by some groups within that, perhaps. Who knows? It's difficult to know about that. Having said that, all the things you've identified in the area in terms of the Overton Park, Cambuslang Park and so forth, many of whom have walked round during the COVID problem, as I'm sure others have, seem to me to be necessary things to be done. So I think we're getting value for money out of them. The only slight downturn perhaps is the relatively limited amount for actual pavements in the area, which I'd personally hope would be a more major aspect to that. But that's something to come back to, no doubt. Thanks very much. No particular questions on it.
Just unfortunately, Councillor Brown, it was really down to the public. And as I said earlier, Rutherglen and Cambuslang seemed to buck the trend as far as what they wanted. Mm-hmm. I worked there long enough, I know what they're like.
You like to be different.
Yes.
Any more questions? Margaret Walker?
Thanks, Chair. Just to say, the people in Cambuslang are very committed to Cambuslang Park. They've got various exercises, clearing litter every week, friends of the park, put a lot of work into it. So obviously they care very deeply about it, and I'm sure took part in significant numbers in terms of the ongoing improvement and upkeep of the park, which I have to say the community is very, very active in. Thank you.
Yeah, just to come back in that Chair, obviously we work very closely with the Friends of group because, as you should all be aware, the Green Flag Award for about the last 6-7 years has been one of the key things that we try to make sure we retain. And I would like to think that some of this investment will sort of feed that at least for another couple of years as council and local people's commitment to bringing the park up to scratch.
Katie?
Thanks, Carol. First of all, I would absolutely agree with what Margaret said. I think some of the work that's been going on over the last couple of months in both wards in Cambuslang and people getting involved with the litter picking and so on has been fantastic. And then obviously the council's efforts to support that as well in terms of the new forms that are online and so on. So that's definitely been great. I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Ian and Martin for presenting. A special thank you for the part that you highlighted about Mill Roads. That's a great example of this in action. I'm sure Alistair would agree, and Walter, if he was still here as well. It's something that has been highlighted to us for a number of years. It was always an issue about ownership and how it was getting fixed and where the money was coming from and so on. So for local people to be able to have the chance to sort of feed that in directly and to see that recognised. Because there was a strength of feeling in the community about it, but it's the kind of thing that might not get picked up by other means necessarily. Maybe one or two people emailing a councillor about something isn't the same as actually people, when they're directly asked about something, saying, oh, yeah, wait a minute, that bit of road there. So, yeah, I thought that was a great example of it working well and look forward to seeing how it's going to develop. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Any more questions? Okay, I'll move the report then.
I'll second.
Thanks, John. So thank you, Ian. Thank you, Martin, for coming along. You didn't get as many questions as I expected. No. Usually Roads has far more questions than that. But thank you for the presentation. It was really comprehensive and detailed. So thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Chair.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye now.
Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, thank you. So we'll move to item 5 on the agenda, Participatory Budgeting, Renewable Energy Fund, and it's Colin McFarlane.
Afternoon, councillors, Chair.
Hi, Colin.
My presentation is very short and sweet, as you probably see from the report. It's looking at the micro grants that have been awarded for Cambuslang Rutherglen area. This was kind of devised from various community inquiries in relation to small grants that we had over a number of years. So we eventually went to committee in November 18 to look at putting out £5,000 in each community council to support the local community, as in the community councils are more aware of what some of the more local needs are required, and some of these grants at £500. So we've been running for the pilot year. Everything went well, so we went back to committee and asked to continue this, and it will be continued on as long as we have funds. Cambuslang and Rutherglen area, there's always an issue trying to stretch renewable energy funds to that area because the majority of wind farms are in the more rural areas. So as you can see from the report, it's very short and sweet. And we have 3 community councils from Cambuslang and Rutherglen area that have taken up the award. And that's as short and as sweet as I can make it.
Thanks, Colin. We'll open it up to questions. Any questions for Colin? So your report was that comprehensive then, Colin? There's no need for any questions?
That's ideal, yeah. And hopefully everybody get a look at I know it's more rural area, but the Community Benefit Fund annual report, which shows some of the projects and bigger projects, obviously relating to the Renewable Energy Fund.
Mm-hmm. Do you know, it's great to get an update and kind of see what's happened. And I think from the community councils, we'll all attend the meetings and you hear them being discussed. So to see it kind of come through to fruition, it's great because you hear these things being spoke about and you don't always necessarily see the finished product. So yes, thank you. So if we've got no questions, then I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks for your time, Colin.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, we'll move to item 6 on the agenda, participatory budgeting and pupil equity funding, and it's Jacqueline Wallace.
Hi, Chair. Thanks very much. Mine's maybe with Colin's rather short and sweet compared to some of the others, but hopefully it'll be of interest to you all. So thank you for the opportunity today just to come along. From the report, you'll see schools are, very confident in terms of their allocation of PEF monies. We've been doing that now for a few years and consultation with all of our stakeholders, but participatory budgeting brings obviously that extra accountability, which we've outlined then within the small report that you have, the short report at the moment. The report does outline our plans and most importantly, I suppose, our timeline for how we're rolling this out with schools. We did a little bit of work before the holidays. Again, like everybody, in the times of COVID and accountability within schools, that was quite hard within the last term, but, schools have received that well. We have delivered some initial training with our schools as well, which again has been well received, but we are doing refresher training now in August when schools return to ensure that everybody is aware of, again, the requirements and the accountability around about the participatory budgeting spend and asking schools for that minimum of 5%. So again, they can choose to spend slightly more in terms of their accountability for their PB, but a minimum of 5%. But we are on track for what we want to do so far. We have various sort of Google Forms and surveys out at the moment so that schools will return their plans by October. So but at that point in time, we will be able to give yourselves, I think, a fuller account of what the spend will look like and what the actions will be for schools, which I think will be, I'm sure, of great interest to you. And the main thing will be for us as well then about the accountability for schools for reporting back on that, later on in the year as well, so that, again, to ensure impact in terms of that spend. So as I say, yeah, we have launched, we have started, possibly a wee bit slower progress than some of the other services, just again because of school holidays and the kind of position we were in. But we're happy and confident in terms of moving forward that schools will embrace this, and it will be another way of them to engage with all their stakeholders, to make that positive change within schools. And we are on track for where we want to be, as I say, for the new term, with lots of support materials available for schools, which I think is important as well. So there's lots of presentations and resources ready so that each school's been asked to nominate a lead for this particular piece of work. So they'll be well supported delivering it, and also some help with the consultation aspect as well, which can sometimes be quite tricky. And as you've picked up yourself, we'd like to do quite a lot of that face-to-face rather than necessarily being virtual. So all going well, that will be the hope for moving forward within our schools and our establishments. But that's really us to date, as I say, with hopefully more updates to come for yourselves over the next couple of sessions, but happy to take any questions for today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Margaret Walker?
Yeah, thank you. Just quickly, I assume there'll be a breakdown of all the schools within Rutherglen, Cambuslang in terms of how the process went and how it's going to be spent.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, we would look to see once we've got, we love a Google form as we do in education, so we will be able to get all the surveys from that. That the schools are responding by October, mid-October, just before the holiday. So after that, certainly we will be able to look and give you that breakdown to see, where they're intending their spend to be and how much it will be as well. So we'll be able to give you that after the October holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie?
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Jacqueline, for the presentation as well. I just wanted to say I'm really excited about this. I think it's great news. I think those of us that have been going along to parent councils and things over the last few years have seen essentially like this has been happening, but on a sort of more informal basis. You see like head teachers and deputies coming into parent councils and saying, right, we're thinking of spending money on this, whatever it is, whether it's investment into a nurture class or it's a bit of outdoor play equipment or it's something specific which pupils are going to use. And I think that this is the sort of next sensible, logical step along that. I'm happy that we're going down this route because it's actually including parents and carers, therefore, who don't necessarily attend parent councils or friends of type groups or have that link in with the school, and I think that's really important. And also including our support staff as well, and it makes sense to me. So I'm looking forward to further reports and the breakdowns you were talking about. Thanks, Jacqueline.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Katie.
Any further questions? Okay, I'll move the report.
I'll second.
Thanks, John. So thanks, Jacqueline. Thank you for coming along, and we'll look forward to future updates.
No problem. Thanks very much for your time, everyone. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, and we'll move to item 7 on the agenda, participatory budgeting, place-based programme, and it's Jacqueline Queen to speak the report.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Chair. So I'm here to talk about the place-based programme. So we've got 4 areas in the Cambuslang Rutherglen locality that we're going to talk about today. So Springhall and Whittleborough, who were allocated £4,200. I don't know if I should maybe first start off by saying the total budget was £40,000, and that was allocated using population size for our 9 priority areas through the Community Planning Partnership. So it was £1.40 per head, and we used that allocation to work out how much each area was getting. So Springhall and Whittleborough were £4,200, and the stakeholders group there are quite well seasoned when it comes to participatory budgeting, because their neighbourhood plan has been in place for a wee while. So they've actually took the decision to kind of defer their participatory budgeting process a wee bit. So they're just kind of in talks of how they're going to proceed with that right now. So in the report, what they're talking about is using the priorities that have been highlighted in the neighbourhood plan, and then using the allocation to kind of focus on some of the priorities that are coming through there. So they've focused on more leisure and social recreation opportunities and health improvement, stronger and better communities, better financial wellbeing, and they're having a meeting at the end of July there. We haven't heard anything since, so I'm not sure how that meeting went. My colleague is actually on holiday, so I don't have an update on that. But they were looking to determine at that meeting kind of how they were going to allocate their funds. So that's kind of what having Springhall Whittleborough right now. But it does say that the 9th of August, they were looking to kind of start a short survey to ask local people which of the priorities they would like the money to be kind of focused on. The next area on the report is Fern Hill. which got allocated £2,800. Fernhill neighbourhood plan is kind of got off to a wee bit of a rocky start because the timing of it, which is a shame. But we're plodding along and we're trying our best to engage with the community there. So Fernhill was allocated £2,800 and for the PB budget. So the stakeholders decided to go a kind of similar model to Cambuslang East, which we'll come to a wee bit later, and looking at small grants. So local groups in the area who operate within the area and are targeting local people for Fernhill were invited to send us some applications, and then the applications, as long as they were focusing on working with people in Fernhill, they were put through to the public vote. And just as of today, I've just received the report through the SNAP surveys. So we had 337 people voted in Fernhill. We don't actually have the results yet because I'm still kind of making sure all the postcodes and the house numbers and stuff match up before we obviously release kind of who's been allocated the funding. But we used a kind of mixture of different ways to engage in Fernhill because we know that sometimes online isn't the best way. And we heard that through the stakeholders group. They kind of says to us that a lot of people weren't really comfortable with voting online and stuff like that. So we tried our best, obviously with restrictions being eased, we tried to jump on the opportunity. So we managed to have a kind of outdoor voting week where we were just kind of hanging about at the shops and at the parks and stuff like that, just trying to catch people passing by and asking them to vote. And we had iPads there so that people didn't need to have their own kind of devices and stuff like that, because we know that was an issue. The other PB that we've done with the kind of cookies, where it only allows one vote per device, whereas we had the council's iPads, so that made it a wee bit easier. But we were quite happy with the 337 votes that were received. And we'll have it out pretty soon what groups actually received the funding. So that's kind of all we have in Fernhill at the moment. Cambuslang East was allocated £6,300, and that was split between the three priority communities within Cambuslang East, which are Halfway, Westburn and Circuit. So they were allocated £2,100 each. And again, that was a small grants model that the stakeholders decided to use because the neighbourhood plan is quite new within the area. We haven't had a chance to have a launch event or kind of. It was the neighbourhood plan was actually just published as we went into lockdown, so we haven't managed to kind of have any movement on kind of making the priorities a reality within the community. So we used a small grants approach and we asked local groups to apply based on the top priorities that were identified in the neighbourhood plan. So we received 6 applications in Halfway, out of which 4 were allocated funding. And you can see, I don't know if you want me to talk through the kind of the projects. So it's Project 31, I'll just run through them quickly. For outdoor play sessions, South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture for a sports hub, Halfway Community Council for a community clean, and Halfway Bingo Club were all allocated funding in the Halfway area. Westburn, we received 5 applications and 3 were funded. So Westburn Youth Project Outdoor Play and Westburn Youth Project Memorial Garden, and South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture for a sports hub. In the Circuit, we received 6 applications, and out of that we managed to get 4 funded. Sorry, I was confused myself a wee bit there because 3 of them had equal amounts of votes. So Circuit Youth Project for outdoor play, Leaps Community Garden, Circuit Youth Project for a pantomime, and South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture Sports Hub, and there as well was funded. So that was we had quite a lot of votes there as well, as you can see, for Cambuslang East, and I think we were quite happy with that 30% of the voters were actually asked as to advise them with the outcome. So that means that kind of people are interested in the process and they're interested in the neighbourhood plan, and we're going to get in touch with these people to let them know kind of what happened and ask them to be more involved in the neighbourhood planning process as well. And hopefully that will build up some interest for the stakeholders group as well. And 62% of the people that voted were in the top 15% most deprived areas as well. no, the postcodes that we got were full, and that's because, again, we were out in the community with iPads similar to Fern Hill, and a lot of the time we were talking to young people, so obviously we weren't very comfortable asking young people for their full postcode and stuff, because they might have kind of thought we were asking for some personal information. So we only asked young people if they were from that area, and obviously if they said yes, then they were able to vote. So that means that some of the postcode breakdown kind of isn't as accurate as we would have liked it to have been, but we tried our best, and we managed to get quite a lot of postcodes and quite a lot of information there. Burn Hill was allocated £4,200. So Burn Hill stakeholders decided to go a wee bit a different route, because they didn't feel, the stakeholders didn't feel there was very many local groups that would be able to bid in for the money, so they kind of steered away for the small grants model, and they went for a more kind of proposals model. So they looked at their neighbourhood plan that had just recently been published as well, and they decided that they would focus on the kind of top priorities there, and that the local groups would come together and come up with a project proposal on kind of how they could kind of make some of the issues that people highlighted kind of happen. So the Burn Hill Action Group focused on outdoor play, and they were kind of talking to South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture and a number of like Regen FX Youth Trust. There's a Burn Hill Children's Group, so they're all working together to see how they could come up with a summer programme for young people in the area. So that got the majority of votes. So they kind of worked on a percentage basis because they had two proposals. So that was 62% of the vote. So that got 62% of the funding allocation. And in second place, quite closely followed, it was a community garden. So the Burn Hill Action Group is going to work with the kind of relevant agencies to get a community garden in the go in Burn Hill. And that was 38% of the vote, so they get 38% of the allocation there. And of the 182 postcodes that we got, we were quite happy with the result. The 98% of them were in the top 15% most deprived areas. And actually 74% of the votes were done during the face-to-face engagement, and we felt that was quite a good statistic for us to show that communities actually prefer as being in the community and actually talking to them, which we know has been really hard for the past kind of year or so. But we're glad to be out in the community and able to talk to local people again, because that's the kind of results that we can get when we're actually face-to-face and there for the community to come and engage with us. And Burn Hill, it was a wee bit lower than Cambuslang East, but they were 21% of voters were looking to kind of get involved in the neighbourhood plan as well. So we felt that was quite a good result in Burn Hill as well. And we've also got a demographic breakdown in Appendix 1. I will only talk through that. We were quite happy with the demographics. I don't think there was anything that stood out that we really needed to focus on in the areas. So you can have a wee look, and if MD's got any questions, they can let me know.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Okay, we'll open up to questions. Margaret Cowie.
Thanks, Chair. Just to say, what Jacqueline was saying about the Fern Hill PB budgeting, it did go off to a bit of a rocky start, but all credit to Jacqueline and Heather and Shan. You know, they were out in the streets banging in the votes, and it's absolutely phenomenal. They've managed to get 337 votes. So all credit to them, and well done, girls. And I'm looking forward to the outcome. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thanks, Margaret. We had a lot of the stakeholders that Margaret was at herself at the shop with a few times, and so was the kind of applicants. So Fern Hill Youth Project and Communities Together and the Play Scheme, we had local stakeholders there as well pushing the vote. But thanks very much, Margaret. We really appreciate it.
Any further questions? Okay, I'll move the report.
I'll second.
Thanks, John. Jacqueline, thanks for the presentation. It was really detailed, and the breakdown was really, really helpful, you know, to go into the kind of finer detail. And I agree with you, the people asking for, you know, to kind of to have feedback and to know the outcome is really, really encouraging, because we want people to be engaged, don't we? So this is the crux of everything. So thank you for taking the time to come along and for your detailed report.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, so we'll move to item 8 on the agenda, which is the Community Awards. I know, Margaret, that you've declared an interest, so we'll take them separately, okay?
Right, no bother, Carol.
Bear with me, I've lost my paperwork. Okay, so we'll start with Fern Hill Senior Citizens Men Club, and it's an award of £350. Happy to approve the awards?
Yep, great.
Thank you. And would you like to leave the meeting now, Margaret, and we'll take the other awards?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Chair, sorry, I think I'm probably best declaring an interest in this next one as well, because I've donated personally to it, so I'll leave and come back.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's Royal Borough of Rutherglen History Group, and the award is suggested £600. Happy to approve?
Agree.
Thank you very much. So I'll just move the report. You happy to second, John?
Agree.
Great, thank you very much. We have no items of urgent business, so thank you all for your attendance today, and I will see you all soon.
Thanks very much, Carol. Bye.